Hello there! Those of you who have had a chance to read my book, The Reluctant Apostate, will be familiar with a chapter titled Blood and Tears, in which I partly discuss the prohibition of blood transfusions for Jehovah's Witnesses. The chapter includes the story of Phil Dunne, a former Jehovah's Witness from the United States who very nearly died as a result of refusing blood, only to later awaken from his indoctrination and realise just how close he came to ending his life for no reason. Phil's story, as presented in my book, is based on my interview with him in Zagreb last September, so September 2016, during his vacation in Croatia. Until now, for various reasons, I've been unable to show the interview on my channel, but I'm now delighted to present it for you. I think when you watch it, you'll agree with me that Phil provides a crucial insight into Watchtower's blood policy. He gives us the sobering reminder that once a JW refuses a life-saving blood transfusion, they usually let go of any opportunity to later regret it. So without further ado, here is my interview with Phil Dunne. Enjoy. Hello there. Well, viewers, you join me in sunny and leafy Zagreb, where I am with Phil Dunne, who has come to see me from, well, he's actually on holiday elsewhere in Croatia, but he agreed to come and visit me here in Zagreb, which I'm very grateful for, because Phil has a very interesting story. You know those stories you hear if you're a former Jehovah's Witness or a Jehovah's Witness? You'll occasionally hear those stories that get told in Kingdom Hall or congregation meetings, where an example is given of somebody who refused blood and yet still survived. And these kind of stories are given to basically buttress the organization's prohibition on blood. Well, Phil's story is one of those stories, and yet it's fascinating how ultimately it helped Phil when he was in that situation to wake up from his indoctrination. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So perhaps we can just back up a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well, I was actually born in Ireland. Both my parents were Irish Catholic. About a year after they got married, my mother was called on by some Jehovah's Witnesses, and she eventually became a witness, tried to raise all of her children as witnesses. We moved to the United States when I was about 7 years old, and I went to meetings, got baptized at 17, got married at 20 to a witness, and then I ended
20 is quite young to be getting married.
It's very young, but
yeah.
Witnesses usually end up getting married young for a variety of reasons. But we won't get into that.
No.
But anyway, so after that, about a few years into our marriage, we decided we were going to move out to California, and things were going great for about a year out there. We made it. We really loved the congregation that we were in. Great friends. We were doing really good, and about a year later, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer of the immune system, and there was a tumor blocking the head of my pancreas, which was making me very jaundiced, putting me through a lot of pain. It took them quite a long time to figure out the proper diagnosis, what was actually wrong with me. They thought it was pancreatic cancer at first, but eventually they were able to narrow it down to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which just requires chemotherapy. But unfortunately, because it took so long, there was a tumor in my stomach that had grown so large that it actually tore a hole in it. And one night I was just at home watching TV. I felt very queasy. I went up to the bathroom to throw up, and I passed out on the floor and I had a seizure. And when I got to the hospital, they told me that I was bleeding internally, and without a blood transfusion, I would most likely die within the next couple of days.
Wow. Incredible. So you're in this situation, which most witnesses think about. When you're a witness, you sign the blood card, or you sign it in the presence of witnesses, don't you? And you resolve that if you're ever in a situation where a doctor tells you you're going to die unless you have a blood transfusion, you make that call and you make that stand. And we're right in saying that you made that stand, didn't you?
I did. And I could have easily gotten around it. If you've never been in that situation, you don't know, but the doctors will come in privately and they will tell you that they can give you blood without anybody ever knowing. They even can have bags that are not labeled, that are not see-through, so you can't see.
And the tube would have to obviously not be see-through.
Yeah, they told me that
Yeah.
you could even have somebody in the room and they wouldn't know that you were getting a blood transfusion. But
Right.
it was mostly, I was terrified of dying, but at the same time, I felt that I couldn't live with the guilt of having had a blood transfusion, because at that time, I was still, believed in what Watchtower had taught me.
So essentially, it wasn't so much a case of, I value my life and I'm not convinced about the blood teaching. It was more a case of, I don't know how I could carry on with my life,
Right.
knowing that I've had a blood transfusion, even if I was the only one who knew.
Yeah, and having to keep it secret from my family, it would probably just tear me apart. I would feel guilty, especially they would probably be proud of me for refusing a blood transfusion and I had secretly taken one. Then I would just feel guilty every time that it's brought up and they use me as a good example. So even though I wasn't sure at the time whether or not I really believed that I was going to wake up in paradise if I died, I really was on the fence about it. I just knew that I couldn't go on living my life with that kind of guilt if I had taken the blood transfusion.
So basically, given the gravity of your situation, we should not be having this conversation right now. But obviously something changed. So what changed?
Yeah, so a couple of days in, a radiologist, or I'm probably using the wrong term for it, they came up with a plan. They said it probably wouldn't work, but they were going to do 10 straight days of targeted intense radiation directed straight at that tumor that was causing the internal bleeding. And they were hoping that they could shrink it enough to be able to cauterize the hole to stop the internal bleeding, and then they could put me through chemotherapy. And surprisingly, it actually worked. I was out of the hospital about 3 weeks later, and then another few weeks later, they started chemotherapy, which lasted about over the course of a year, on and off.
Okay, so basically, and this is one of the things, another kind of irony of the blood teaching is that you survived because of the ingenuity and, frankly, education of some very, very clever people who knew what they knew because they'd gone through years of higher education.
Yeah.
That's astonishing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened when you'd had this close call and you had time to kind of take stock of what had happened? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, well, it's a strange feeling, just accepting that you're going to die, and then a few weeks later they tell you, no, you're going to be okay. I had actually written out
You'd resigned yourself to your fate.
I had written out a non-formal will just to explain what I wanted to happen after I'm gone. You go through that whole process. It feels surreal walking away from it, and the main feeling I had was, do I really believe this? If I had grown up in India, would I believe that I was a Hindu? If I grew up in the Middle East somewhere, would I have believed the Islamic teachings? It's really this religion I was born into.
It was like an existential crisis for you.
Yeah, I wanted it to be real, so I studied harder than I ever have studied before. I got into the blood issue, which a lot of things with the blood issue really disturbed me, as far as the certain hypocritical aspects of it, like we're not allowed to take whole white blood cells. But mother's breast milk has trillions of white blood cells in it. And so are we not allowed to breastfeed our children?
Yeah.
There were so many things that didn't make sense like that. And I always loved science and history. Those were my favorite things about being in the organization, were when we studied anything scientific, like is there a creator who cares about you? The old blue book, the Life, How Did It Get Here? Yeah. I loved prophecies, like the Daniel's prophecy, and going through history and all that. And I decided to, for the first time ever, go through those books with a critical eye, which I'd never done before, and checking every single reference that they list. And every single time I did that, I would find either a quote taken out of context, sometimes made up, or the person that they're quoting is not an expert in all of that in their field at all. You know, I don't know if this is just an example. I remember there was something about astrophysics, and I believe they were quoting a botanist on it. You know, a completely different field, and I thought that was strange. And it just, those kind of things kept piling up over and over time, and I just realized that the governing body, who I thought would never try to mislead us in any way, they are obviously misleading us through the publications by being disingenuous and misquoting these people.
You found out you were being lied to.
Right.
Yeah, I think the creation book, because that's kind of a book that a lot of us as witnesses, when we were witnesses, had a lot of respect for, because like you say, there are so many scientists quoted, and there's so much technical jargon in there. You just think, well, it must be right.
Yeah.
At a certain level, whenever you see a book and it's beautifully bound and all the illustrations are there, you think, well, how can this not be right? But I had a similar experience to you when I was a witness. I called on somebody who was a scholar. He wrote books, but they were for universities and colleges. He said, you're never going to be able to buy one of my books. But his pet subject was evolution, and he was actually showing me misquotes from the creation book when I was calling on him as a witness. And at some stage, I think my way of arguing around it was to say, oh, well, it's not that bad, because at least it shows you where you can find the quotes if you want to. And that was my way of arguing through it. So, wow, you basically were set on this path of awakening, but the problem that you had, I hope you don't mind me going here, is that you, not only were you a witness with friends and family who were witnesses, but you were in a marriage.
Yeah, and my wife was a 100% believer, still is.
Yeah.
There's really nothing that I could have told her that would have changed that. I did try, but there was really no hope. I mean, she just.
And there's no hard feelings there. It is.
No,
I'm assuming.
It was mutual. We, besides the stuff with the organization and teachings, we weren't getting along because basically we were going down different paths in life. I was extremely depressed over realizing that what I believed in my whole life was a lie, and I wasn't doing well because of that. I was drinking too much. I was really letting my life fall apart. So our marriage was also suffering. So it was really mutual that when we talked about it, that we would both walk away, that there's no point in trying to make it work when she believes something that I don't, and it's fundamental to our lives. So yeah, I had to walk away from it.
Now, what the viewers don't know is that when this video goes up on my YouTube channel with your name, that's the first time you've effectively outed yourself for feeling the way you feel. So
I've been on XJW forums all over the internet, posting stories and news articles. I've been doing a lot of activism, but I haven't revealed my identity.
Yeah.
So I've just gotten to the point where there's really no point in hiding anymore, because everyone that I ever cared about has already shunned me.
Right, you're already being preemptively shunned simply for losing
besides a handful of people that I won't mention because I don't want them to get in trouble with their respective congregations.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Really, everyone has pretty much cut me out of my life, out of their lives. So there's
isn't it interesting, because that behaviour is supposed to encourage you to stay in.
Yeah.
But it has the opposite effect.
Exactly.
I had the same thing.
Yeah.
Incredible. Wow. So, as far as your mental state now, you've been through so much in your life. But how's your mental state? Do you feel as though you're on top of things? Do you feel as though you've still got some way to go to find peace? Or?
I definitely have some ways to go. I would say that this year has been the happiest year of my life, despite having to go through a lot of traumatic things. I'm much happier and content than I ever have been. So it's a good thing.
And can I just say to whoever that radiologist was, or the medical professional, thank you for saving this guy's life.
And I also want to apologize to every part of that staff that were probably extremely frustrated with me for refusing blood over and over again. I wish that I could personally apologize to all of them, because that just must have been so hard for them to watch someone die when they know they could save them.
And if because obviously I don't know who's going to end up watching this video, but if there's someone watching this video who is themselves facing the blood issue, what would be your advice to them?
Really just, if you still believe that this is God's organization, I would recommend that you try to research as much as you can on the different fractions and what those fractions are used for, because like I said before, the with white blood cells in milk, there are a lot of things with blood transfusions that they don't tell you about.
No.
But a lot of it is just very hypocritical and arbitrary and not scriptural. So really do your research outside of the organization. I mean, it's a life or death decision.
And please stay alive. We want you to stay alive.
And if you are a former witness and you still have a durable power of attorney on file with any congregation, I'd suggest you send a notarized letter to that congregation, also to any hospital or doctors that have them on site, saying that you no longer agree with your former DPA and that you would like a new one. Because if you're unconscious and the last one that's on file, someone's going to act in your behalf based on what your blood card says.
I never even thought of that. You could be awakened, but yet still get into a situation where you're denied blood.
Right.
Amazing, isn't it? Well, listen, Phil, I really appreciate this conversation.
No problem.
And I know you've got different ideas for activism, which I totally support you with. I'm here for you with that. And I'm just thrilled that we can be having this conversation because you're alive.
Yeah.
And brilliant. Good luck.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.